There is a moment in every human life when the truth stands quietly at the door and waits to be noticed. Not the truth taught by the crowd, not the truth repeated by newspapers, social media, or the opinions of those who have surrendered their dreams. A deeper truth. A truth so powerful that entire destinies have been built upon it. A truth that transformed poor men into industrial giants, unknown dreamers into history makers, and ordinary individuals into examples that generations would study long after they were gone. That truth is simple. You become what you believe, not occasionally, not partially, not someday in the distant future. You become what you believe every single day of your life. Your beliefs shape your thoughts influence your decisions determine your actions. Your actions create your habits form your character, and your character becomes your destiny. Most people spend their lives trying to change their circumstances without ever changing the beliefs that created those circumstances. They fight shadows while ignoring the source of the light. They attempt to harvest a different crop from the seeds they continue to plant. And then they wonder why their lives remain unchanged. But every achievement that has ever existed first appeared as a belief in someone's mind. Before a skyscraper touched the clouds, it existed as a thought. Before an invention transformed civilization, it existed as an idea. Before an empire was built, before a company was launched, before a fortune was earned, before a movement inspired millions, there was first a human being who believed in something that nobody else could yet see. The world has always belonged to those who could see the invisible before it became visible. This was the lesson Andrew Carnegie understood. It was the lesson Thomas Edison lived. It was the lesson Henry Ford proved. And it remains the lesson waiting to transform the life of anyone willing to accept responsibility for their own mind. Because the greatest prison on earth has never been made of steel bars. It has been made of limiting beliefs. The belief that you are not capable. The belief that you are too late. The belief that success belongs to someone else. The belief that your past defines your future. The belief that circumstances are stronger than vision. The belief that failure is permanent. The belief that your dreams are unrealistic. These beliefs become invisible chains. And what makes them dangerous is that most people do not even know they are wearing them. They mistake their limitations for reality. They confuse repeated thoughts with absolute truth. They accept inherited beliefs without questioning whether those beliefs deserve authority over their lives. Yet history repeatedly tells a different story. History whispers that every extraordinary achievement began with a refusal to accept the limitations of the present moment. Think of Edwin C. Barnes, a man with no wealth, no influence, no special advantage, no powerful connections. Yet he possessed something more valuable than all of those things combined. He possessed a burning desire. When Barnes decided he would become a business partner of Thomas Edison, the world would have laughed at him. The evidence certainly did. He had no reason to believe such a thing was possible. No logical pathway, no guarantee, no proof, only belief. And belief, when mixed with absolute certainty and relentless action, becomes one of the most powerful forces available to humanity. Barnes did not merely wish. He did not merely hope. He did not merely fantasize. He decided. That distinction changes everything. Most people desire success. Few decide they will have it. Most people want a better future. Few commit themselves so completely that retreat becomes impossible. Desire is where transformation begins, not a weak preference, not a casual interest. Not something you pursue only when conditions are favorable. A burning desire. A desire so intense that it begins reorganizing your entire identity. A desire that changes the way you think, the way you speak, the way you spend your time, the way you interpret obstacles, the way you see yourself. The truth is that people do not become great accidentally. Greatness begins when desire becomes stronger than fear. Because fear is always present. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of poverty, fear of uncertainty, fear of looking foolish. These fears have buried more dreams than any economic crisis ever could. They whisper convincing lies. They tell people to wait, to play safe, to lower expectations, to settle, to avoid risk, to remain realistic. And little by little, those whispers become beliefs. Then those beliefs become identities. Then those identities become lives. Years pass. Decades pass. Potential remains trapped beneath layers of hesitation. The tragedy is not failure. The tragedy is never discovering what might have happened if belief had been stronger than fear. The men and women who change history are not fearless. They simply refuse to allow fear to make decisions for them. Abraham Lincoln faced defeat after defeat before becoming one of the most respected leaders in history. Thomas Edison endured thousands of unsuccessful experiments before producing results. Henry Ford was mocked by experts who believed his vision could never succeed. The world often laughs before it applauds. It doubts before it believes. It criticizes before it celebrates. And this is why belief must come before evidence. If you require evidence before you believe, you will forever follow rather than lead. Every pioneer has walked into uncertainty. Every visionary has acted before receiving permission from the world. Every great accomplishment has demanded faith. Faith is one of the most misunderstood forces in existence. Many imagine faith as blind optimism. But faith in the philosophy of achievement is much more than optimism. Faith is emotionalized belief. Faith is the ability to hold an image of the future so clearly that your actions begin aligning with it long before physical results appear. Faith turns possibility into expectation, and expectation influences behavior. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One believes success is possible. The other believes failure is inevitable. Their circumstances may be identical, yet their decisions will differ. Their persistence will differ. Their confidence will differ. Their willingness to act will differ. And eventually their outcomes will differ. The belief came first. The result followed. This is one of the most important truths ever discovered. Human beings consistently move in the direction of their dominant beliefs, whether those beliefs empower them or destroy them. Your subconscious mind does not carefully evaluate every thought. It responds to repetition. It responds to emotion. It responds to what you consistently impress upon it. This is why autosuggestion matters. Every day, people are programming themselves. Some are doing it intentionally. Most are doing it unconsciously. Every statement repeated often enough becomes instruction. Every thought consistently entertained becomes influence. Every mental picture repeatedly visualized becomes a blueprint. If someone repeatedly says, "I am unlucky," the mind listens. If someone repeatedly says, "I never succeed," the mind listens. If someone repeatedly says, "People like me don't become wealthy," the mind listens. Eventually, the subconscious accepts these statements as instructions. Then behavior adjusts accordingly. Opportunities go unnoticed. Confidence diminishes. Effort weakens. Vision shrinks. The prediction fulfills itself, yet the same mechanism can be used in the opposite direction. The mind can be trained, directed, conditioned, empowered. This is why successful individuals guard their thoughts so carefully. They understand that repeated thoughts become beliefs, and beliefs eventually become reality. The greatest battle any person will ever fight is not against competition, not against circumstances, not against the economy. It is the battle for control of their own mind, because whoever controls the mind controls the future. Imagine standing at the helm of a massive ship crossing a vast ocean. The ship represents your life. The destination represents your destiny. The steering wheel represents your beliefs. A small adjustment in direction may seem insignificant today. Yet over time it completely changes where you arrive. That is the power of belief. Tiny thoughts repeated daily create enormous consequences over years. A person does not suddenly become successful. A person becomes successful internally long before success appears externally. The outer world eventually reflects the inner world, just as a mirror reflects the face standing before it. This principle explains why some people repeatedly rise after setbacks while others collapse after minor disappointments. The difference is rarely intelligence, rarely talent, rarely luck. The difference often lies in what they believe about themselves. A person who believes obstacles are temporary keeps moving. A person who believes obstacles are permanent stops. A person who believes solutions exist continues searching. A person who believes defeat is final surrenders. And life responds accordingly. The mind is not merely observing reality, it is participating in its creation. That is why clarity matters. A vague desire produces vague results. A definite purpose creates direction. Andrew Carnegie understood this better than most. He recognized that the people who achieve remarkable outcomes are usually those who have decided exactly what they want, not approximately, not someday, exactly. The world rewards clarity because clarity creates power. When purpose becomes definite, energy stops leaking into distraction. Focus sharpens, decisions become easier, persistence becomes natural, resources begin gathering around a central objective, the individual stops wandering and starts advancing. Most people underestimate the importance of knowing precisely what they want. They spend years drifting between possibilities, years reacting instead of creating, years allowing circumstances to determine direction. But the moment purpose becomes definite, something changes. The mind begins organizing itself around achievement. And once the mind becomes organized around achievement, destiny begins to change, not because the universe suddenly decides to favor one person over another, but because clarity creates a force that scattered thinking can never produce. The individual who knows exactly where they are going starts noticing opportunities that were always present but previously invisible. The same streets, the same conversations, the same books, the same circumstances begin revealing possibilities that once went unnoticed. What changed was not the world. What changed was perception. This is why so many people spend years waiting for a breakthrough while ignoring the greatest breakthrough available to them, the transformation of their own thinking. A seed does not become a tree overnight. Yet the moment it is planted, the process begins. In the same way, the moment a definite purpose is planted deeply into the mind, forces begin moving that cannot immediately be seen. The roots form before the branches. The foundation is built before the structure rises. The invisible always precedes the visible. This truth appeared repeatedly throughout the lives of history's greatest achievers. Thomas Edison did not simply invent. He imagined possibilities that others dismissed. He saw a future hidden behind the limitations of the present. While others focused on what could not be done, he focused on what might be done. That difference separated him from the crowd. Imagination is often misunderstood. Many treat it as entertainment. Many see it as fantasy. Many assume it belongs only to artists, writers, or dreamers. Yet imagination is one of the most practical powers ever given to humanity. Every building, every invention, every business, every movement, every achievement, every fortune, every transformation first existed within imagination. The world around you is evidence of imagination made physical. Someone imagined roads before roads existed. Someone imagined airplanes before airplanes flew. Someone imagined communication across continents before technology made it possible. The future is always born in the imagination of someone who refuses to accept present limitations as permanent. Napoleon Hill described different forms of imagination, but the lesson remains timeless. The mind can rearrange existing ideas into new combinations. It can also receive flashes of insight that seem to arrive from somewhere beyond ordinary reasoning. Both forms become valuable when directed toward a definite purpose. Without purpose, imagination wanders. With purpose, imagination creates, and imagination becomes infinitely more powerful when supported by specialized knowledge. There is a dangerous myth that success belongs to those who know everything. The truth is very different. No individual knows everything. No individual can master every field. The most successful people in history were not necessarily those with the most information. They were often those who knew how to acquire, organize, and apply knowledge effectively. Henry Ford became one of the most influential industrialists in history, despite being criticized for lacking certain academic knowledge. During a famous legal dispute, attorneys attempted to embarrass him by asking detailed questions about various subjects. Ford calmly explained that he had no need to carry every answer in his own mind. He could summon experts whenever necessary. That lesson remains powerful today. Information has never been more available. Knowledge sits inside phones, computers, libraries, courses, conversations, and experiences. Yet information alone creates nothing. Applied knowledge changes everything. A person may read hundreds of books and remain stuck. Another may apply one powerful idea and transform their life. Knowledge becomes power only when directed toward action, only when connected to purpose, only when translated into results. The modern world often celebrates consumption, but achievement rewards implementation. Many people spend years preparing to begin, years gathering information, years waiting until they feel ready, years searching for certainty. But certainty rarely arrives before action. Action creates clarity. Action reveals lessons. Action produces growth, and action requires planning. Dreams without plans remain wishes. Desire without plans remains fantasy. Faith without plans remains incomplete. The bridge between vision and reality is organized planning. Yet planning is often romanticized. People imagine perfect plans, perfect timing, perfect conditions, perfect certainty. History tells another story. Most successful plans begin imperfectly. They evolve, adapt, improve, strengthen. The first version is rarely the final version. The path is rarely straight. The important thing is movement. When a person commits to a purpose, develops a plan, and begins taking action, feedback appears. Obstacles reveal weaknesses. Failures expose flaws. Experience provides correction. This is where many people stop. They encounter resistance and interpret it as a sign to quit. But resistance is often a sign that growth is occurring. Every meaningful pursuit eventually encounters difficulty. Every worthwhile dream eventually demands sacrifice. Every great ambition eventually faces moments of uncertainty. The question is never whether obstacles will appear. The question is whether belief will survive their appearance. Consider the story of R.U. Darby. He pursued gold with excitement and determination. Then the gold seemed to disappear. Discouraged, he abandoned the effort and sold the equipment. The buyer hired an engineer. The engineer examined the situation. A short distance beyond where Darby had stopped, an enormous gold deposit was discovered, just a few feet away, a few feet from wealth, a few feet from success, a few feet from victory. The story has survived for generations because it reveals a painful truth. Many people quit when they are closer than they realize. They interpret temporary setbacks as permanent failure. They assume the absence of immediate results means progress is impossible. They stop digging. Then someone else continues. Persistence often makes the difference between unrealized potential and extraordinary achievement. The world celebrates success stories, but it rarely sees the invisible moments that created them. The mornings when nobody believed, the evenings filled with doubt, the months without results. The years of effort before recognition arrived. Persistence is not glamorous. Persistence is not dramatic. Persistence is often quiet. It is choosing to continue when emotions suggest stopping. It is maintaining commitment after excitement fades. It is acting despite uncertainty. It is remaining loyal to a vision before evidence appears. This is why persistence is inseparable from belief. Without belief, persistence collapses. Without persistence, belief remains powerless. Together, they become unstoppable. Every major achievement in history bears the fingerprints of persistence. Abraham Lincoln endured repeated political defeats. Thomas Edison endured repeated experimental failures. Walt Disney faced rejection after rejection. Countless entrepreneurs experienced setbacks before success. The pattern repeats because adversity is not the opposite of success. Adversity is often part of success. The obstacle becomes the training ground. The challenge becomes the teacher. The setback becomes preparation. The difficulty becomes development. People who understand this gain a tremendous advantage. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" That question changes everything, because hidden inside adversity are lessons unavailable through comfort. Strength emerges through resistance. Discipline emerges through challenge. Wisdom emerges through experience. Character emerges through struggle. The individual who learns to transform adversity into advantage develops a resilience that circumstances cannot easily destroy. And resilience becomes even stronger when supported by the right environment. No person succeeds entirely alone. This is one of the most overlooked truths in personal achievement. The people surrounding you influence your thinking more than you may realize. Conversations shape beliefs. Beliefs influence decisions. Decisions influence destiny. This is why the mastermind principle remains so powerful. When individuals unite around a common purpose with harmony and mutual respect, something extraordinary occurs. Knowledge multiplies, ideas expand, energy increases, solutions emerge. Perspective broadens. The combined intelligence becomes greater than the sum of its individual parts. Andrew Carnegie understood this deeply. Many assume he built success through personal effort alone. The reality is different. He surrounded himself with capable people, experts, thinkers, strategists, visionaries. He understood that greatness often requires cooperation. The strongest minds do not isolate themselves. They connect, they collaborate, they learn, they contribute. In today's world, this lesson is more relevant than ever. Your environment is not limited to physical proximity. It includes what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, who influences your thinking, which voices receive your attention. Every influence plants seeds. Some seeds strengthen belief, others weaken it. Some encourage growth. Others encourage limitation. A person cannot consistently absorb negativity and expect a positive mental attitude. The mind reflects its dominant influences. That is why guarding your environment is not selfish. It is necessary, because eventually your environment becomes your expectations, and your expectations become your reality. The future often arrives disguised as the thoughts you repeatedly entertain today. That is why the battle for your mind remains the most important battle you will ever fight. Not because the world is determined to stop you, but because every day you are being asked a question. What will you believe? Will you believe the evidence of your current circumstances, or will you believe in the possibility of something greater? Will you allow temporary conditions to define permanent conclusions? Or will you recognize that circumstances are often nothing more than snapshots in a larger story that is still being written? The answer to those questions determines far more than most people realize. Because belief does not merely influence behavior, it shapes identity. And identity is one of the strongest forces in human nature. People consistently act in alignment with who they believe they are. A person who believes they are capable behaves differently from someone who believes they are limited. A person who believes they are a leader behaves differently from someone who believes they must always follow. A person who believes they can create wealth approaches opportunities differently from someone who believes wealth belongs only to others. The greatest transformation occurs when a person stops trying to change isolated behaviors and begins changing the beliefs that produce those behaviors. This is where the subconscious mind becomes one of the most fascinating and powerful forces in existence. Every thought you repeatedly entertain eventually leaves an impression. Every emotion you repeatedly experience leaves a mark. Every belief you consistently reinforce sinks deeper into the hidden layers of your mind. The subconscious is like fertile soil. It does not argue. It does not debate. It accepts what is planted repeatedly. Plant fear, and fear grows. Plant doubt, and doubt grows. Plant confidence, purpose, gratitude, determination, and vision, and those qualities grow as well. The challenge is that many people allow others to plant their mental gardens. The criticism of a teacher, the discouragement of a parent, the cynicism of a friend, the negativity of society, the fears of the crowd. Over time, these voices become internal voices. The individual begins repeating the limitations they once heard from others, and then they wonder why life feels restricted. But the moment a person becomes conscious of this process, everything can begin to change. Because no matter what has been planted in the past, new seeds can be planted today. New beliefs can be cultivated. New expectations can be formed. New identities can emerge. This is one reason gratitude possesses such extraordinary power. Many people misunderstand gratitude. They see it as politeness, as positive thinking, as a pleasant emotional exercise. But gratitude does something much deeper. It shifts focus, and wherever focus goes, energy follows. The person who constantly focuses on lack trains the mind to notice absence. The person who constantly focuses on possibility trains the mind to notice opportunity. The person who focuses on blessings develops a different emotional state than the person who focuses exclusively on problems. This emotional state matters because emotion amplifies thought. A thought charged with emotion becomes more influential. It sinks deeper. It carries greater force. It gains momentum. Faith itself is strengthened by emotion. Desire is strengthened by emotion. Purpose is strengthened by emotion. The most successful people in history were not merely logical about their dreams. They were emotionally committed to them. Their vision was not a casual preference. It became part of their identity. And identity is powerful because it influences behavior even when motivation disappears. Motivation comes and goes. Excitement rises and falls. Emotions fluctuate. But identity remains. A person who sees themselves as disciplined continues when motivation fades. A person who sees themselves as persistent continues when excitement disappears. A person who sees themselves as resilient continues when circumstances become difficult. This is why self-mastery is so important. The world often teaches people to seek control over external things, control over money, control over status, control over circumstances. Yet the greatest victories are internal: the ability to govern your thoughts, the ability to direct your emotions, the ability to remain focused despite distraction, the ability to continue despite discomfort, the ability to act despite fear. These abilities create freedom. Without self-mastery, success becomes fragile. With self-mastery, success becomes sustainable. The ancient battle between impulse and discipline continues inside every person. One voice seeks comfort. The other seeks growth. One seeks immediate gratification. The other seeks lasting achievement. One asks what feels easy. The other asks what creates progress. The direction of a life is often determined by which voice receives authority. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood ideas in Napoleon Hill's philosophy, the principle often referred to as sex transmutation. For many people, the phrase creates confusion, yet at its core, it points toward a profound truth. Human beings possess tremendous creative energy. The most successful individuals learn how to direct that energy toward constructive purposes, toward achievement, toward creation, toward innovation, toward excellence, toward meaningful contribution. The same force that drives desire can be transformed into ambition, into creativity, into vision, into determination. History repeatedly shows that many extraordinary achievers possessed unusual levels of emotional intensity. What separated them was not merely having energy. It was directing that energy toward a purpose larger than immediate gratification. Undirected energy dissipates. Directed energy creates. This principle appears everywhere in nature. A river without boundaries floods. A river with direction generates power. Sunlight scattered across a field warms. Sunlight concentrated through a lens ignites fire. Human potential follows the same pattern. The question is never whether energy exists. The question is where it is being directed. Purpose provides direction. Discipline provides structure. Belief provides momentum. And together they create transformation. This transformation becomes even more fascinating when we consider the brain itself. Long before modern neuroscience explored concepts such as neuroplasticity, mental conditioning, and cognitive influence, thinkers like Napoleon Hill were emphasizing a powerful idea. The brain is not merely a passive observer. It is an active participant in the shaping of experience. Every thought strengthens certain mental pathways. Every repeated action reinforces certain patterns. Every belief influences perception. What you consistently think about affects what you notice. What you repeatedly focus upon affects what becomes significant. Two people can enter the same environment and leave with completely different interpretations because their minds were tuned to different frequencies. One notices opportunity. The other notices obstacles. One notices abundance. The other notices scarcity. One notices possibility. The other notices limitation. The world has not changed. The filter has, and the filter is largely determined by belief. This is why the phrase, "you become what you believe," is not merely inspirational language. It is a practical reality. Beliefs influence perception. Perception influences decisions. Decisions influence actions. Actions influence results. Results reinforce beliefs. Then the cycle repeats. The fortunate news is that this cycle can be intentionally redirected. A person is not permanently trapped by old patterns. The mind can be trained, conditioned, expanded, strengthened. New beliefs can create new outcomes. New outcomes can reinforce new beliefs. A new future can emerge from a new way of thinking. This is also connected to what Hill described as the sixth sense, perhaps the most mysterious of all the principles. The sixth sense is difficult to define because it exists beyond ordinary logic. Many successful people have experienced moments when insight arrived unexpectedly, a sudden idea, a powerful intuition, a feeling that pointed toward the correct decision, a realization that seemed to emerge from somewhere beyond conscious reasoning. Whether one interprets this spiritually, psychologically, or philosophically, the phenomenon remains remarkably common among achievers. The more disciplined, focused, and purpose-driven the mind becomes, the more often these moments seem to appear. It is as though clarity creates receptivity. Noise decreases. Awareness increases. The individual becomes more sensitive to insights that were previously drowned out by distraction. Modern life is filled with noise, constant notifications, constant opinions, constant stimulation, constant distraction. Many people spend so much time reacting that they rarely create space for reflection. Yet some of humanity's greatest ideas emerge during moments of quiet, moments when the mind could listen, moments when deeper wisdom could surface, moments when vision could expand beyond immediate circumstances. The future often reveals itself first as a whisper before it becomes a reality, and only those willing to listen can hear it. This requires courage because listening often reveals uncomfortable truths, truths about wasted potential, truths about procrastination, truths about excuses, truths about fears that have quietly governed decisions for years. Few forces are more destructive than rationalized fear. Fear rarely announces itself openly. It disguises itself as practicality, as caution, as realism, as waiting for the right time, as needing more information, as needing more certainty. But underneath many excuses lies a simple reality. Fear is making the decision. And when fear controls decisions, possibility begins to shrink. Dreams become smaller. Goals become safer. Vision becomes limited. Life becomes narrower. until one day the individual looks back and realizes they spent years protecting themselves from failure, while simultaneously protecting themselves from greatness. The great tragedy is not making mistakes. The great tragedy is refusing to attempt what the heart knows is possible. Every extraordinary life eventually requires a confrontation with fear. Not once, many times, because each new level demands a larger version of yourself, and each larger version requires the release of an old limitation. The person you become tomorrow depends upon the beliefs you are willing to challenge today. The person you become tomorrow depends upon the beliefs you are willing to challenge today. That is the price of transformation, not money, not status, not privilege. The true price is the willingness to abandon the mental habits that no longer serve the future you desire. Every significant breakthrough in human history required someone to release an old belief and embrace a new one. There was a time when people believed flight was impossible. There was a time when people believed certain inventions could never exist. There was a time when entire societies accepted limitations that later generations would consider absurd. Progress has always begun with a challenge to accepted belief, and personal progress follows the same law. The person who remains attached to limiting beliefs remains attached to limiting results. The person who develops empowering beliefs develops empowering possibilities. This is why responsibility becomes one of the most liberating ideas a human being can embrace. Many people hear the word responsibility and think of burden. But true responsibility is power. Because if your future is determined entirely by external forces, then you are powerless. If circumstances control everything, then effort becomes meaningless. If fate alone decides outcomes, then purpose loses significance. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates the opposite. Human beings possess the remarkable ability to influence their direction. They may not control every event. They may not control every obstacle. They may not control every circumstance. But they can control their response. They can control their attitude. They can control their focus. They can control their beliefs. And those controls often become the difference between surrender and achievement. Consider how many individuals faced conditions far more difficult than the average person experiences today. Abraham Lincoln endured failures, losses, criticism, and heartbreak. Thomas Edison experienced repeated setbacks and disappointments. Andrew Carnegie arrived with almost nothing and built one of the greatest business empires of his era. Henry Ford faced ridicule from experts who confidently declared his ideas would fail. None of these individuals possessed a perfect path. None of them received guarantees. None of them were protected from adversity. Yet they shared a common characteristic. They refused to allow temporary circumstances to become permanent conclusions. That refusal changed history, and it can change a life. Because the difference between where you are and where you wish to be often begins with a decision, not a weak decision, not a tentative decision, a committed decision, a decision that eliminates retreat, a decision that creates alignment between desire and action. Most people underestimate the power of decision. They postpone, delay, hesitate, wait for certainty, wait for confidence, wait for ideal conditions. Meanwhile, life continues moving. Opportunities pass. Years disappear. Potential remains unused. The leaders of history developed a different habit. They made decisions, and once those decisions were made, they persisted until results appeared. The world often rewards decisiveness because decisiveness creates momentum. Momentum creates opportunity. Opportunity creates growth. Growth creates achievement. One decision can alter an entire future. One decision to believe, one decision to begin, one decision to continue, one decision to refuse defeat, one decision to accept responsibility, one decision to pursue a vision despite uncertainty. Entire destinies have turned upon such moments, and yet belief alone is not enough. Belief must become action. The bridge between imagination and reality is action. Without action, desire remains a dream. Without action, faith remains theory. Without action, purpose remains potential. Action is where thought becomes substance. Action is where vision enters the physical world. Action is where possibility begins transforming into reality. This is why discipline remains indispensable. Discipline is the ability to act according to purpose rather than emotion, to continue when enthusiasm fades, to remain focused when distractions multiply, to honor commitments even when convenience suggests otherwise. The modern world constantly competes for attention. Every day, countless distractions attempt to pull people away from meaningful goals. Attention has become one of the most valuable resources on earth. Where attention goes, life follows. A distracted mind produces distracted results. A focused mind produces focused results. The individual who learns to direct attention deliberately gains an extraordinary advantage, because achievement is rarely the result of scattered effort. It is usually the result of concentrated effort sustained over time. Think again about the image of a magnifying glass under sunlight. The light exists everywhere, yet when concentrated, it can ignite fire. Human potential works the same way. Most people possess far more potential than they realize. The challenge is not lack of ability. The challenge is lack of concentration. Energy divided among countless distractions loses force. Energy directed toward a definite purpose gains force. Purpose organizes energy. Discipline protects energy. Persistence sustains energy. And belief fuels energy. Together they create a powerful cycle of achievement. This cycle becomes even stronger when a person learns to view life differently. Most people spend years trying to avoid difficulty, trying to avoid discomfort, trying to avoid uncertainty, trying to avoid failure. Yet some of the greatest lessons emerge precisely from those experiences. Failure is often misunderstood. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is information. Failure is feedback. Failure is instruction. Failure reveals weaknesses. Failure exposes assumptions. Failure identifies areas requiring growth. The only true failure is the refusal to learn. R.U. Darby's story continues to resonate because it illustrates this truth so clearly. Many people stop just before breakthrough. They interpret temporary defeat as final defeat. But temporary defeat often contains the seeds of equivalent or greater benefit. This idea appears throughout life. The job loss that leads to a better opportunity. The rejection that redirects someone toward their true purpose. The setback that develops resilience. The disappointment that reveals a hidden path. What appears negative in one season may later reveal itself as essential. This requires trust. Not passive trust, active trust. The trust that continued effort matters. The trust that growth is occurring even when progress seems invisible. The trust that purpose is worth pursuing despite uncertainty. The trust that belief, when supported by disciplined action, eventually produces results. And perhaps this is where the deepest lesson of all emerges. The world you experience externally is constantly influenced by the world you cultivate internally. Every day, consciously or unconsciously, you are constructing a future through your thoughts, through your habits, through your beliefs, through your decisions, through your actions. You are becoming someone. The question is not whether transformation is occurring. Transformation is always occurring. The question is whether it is happening by design or by default. Many people allow circumstances to shape them. Others choose to shape themselves. That choice creates an enormous difference over time. Years from now, the person you become will largely reflect the beliefs you consistently entertained. If you repeatedly believe in limitation, limitation tends to expand. If you repeatedly believe in possibility, possibility tends to expand. If you repeatedly focus on fear, fear gains influence. If you repeatedly focus on purpose, purpose gains influence. Your dominant thoughts become your dominant beliefs. Your dominant beliefs become your dominant actions. Your dominant actions become your life. This is not magic. It is not wishful thinking. It is not blind optimism. It is the practical reality that the mind influences behavior, and behavior influences outcomes. And because the mind can be trained, the future can be influenced. Perhaps not instantly, perhaps not effortlessly, but undeniably. The greatest fortunes, the greatest achievements, the greatest transformations all began in territory invisible to the eye. Inside the imagination, inside belief, inside desire, inside purpose, inside a mind that refused to accept current conditions as final. Every empire was once an idea. Every invention was once a thought. Every movement was once a vision. Every achievement was once considered impossible by someone. The invisible always comes first. The visible follows. That has always been true, and it remains true now. Somewhere in the world tonight, a future leader is holding a belief nobody else understands. Somewhere, an entrepreneur is working on a vision others consider unrealistic. Somewhere, a creator is developing an idea that will eventually influence millions. Somewhere, a dreamer is refusing to surrender despite criticism. History has always belonged to such people, not because they possessed perfect conditions, not because they possessed extraordinary luck, but because they possessed extraordinary belief. They believed long enough to act, acted long enough to persist, persist long enough to improve, improved long enough to succeed, and succeeded long enough to inspire others. The same opportunity exists for every human being willing to assume responsibility for their own thinking. Not responsibility for everything that has happened, but responsibility for what happens next. Responsibility for the beliefs that will be accepted, the thoughts that will be repeated, the goals that will be pursued, the habits that will be developed, the future that will be created. Because no matter what your past contains, your future remains unwritten. No matter how many mistakes have been made, new decisions can be made. No matter how many setbacks have occurred, new efforts can begin. No matter how long doubt has existed, belief can be strengthened. No matter how many times fear has spoken, courage can answer. The power has always been closer than most people realize, not hidden in distant circumstances, not locked inside another person, not reserved for a chosen few. It has been waiting within the human mind, waiting within desire, waiting within purpose, waiting within belief. And perhaps that is why this truth has endured through generations, because it speaks to something timeless inside every person, the quiet awareness that they were meant for more, the feeling that potential remains undiscovered, the intuition that a greater version of themselves is possible. That intuition is not an accident. It is an invitation to think differently, to believe differently, to act differently, to live differently, to stop measuring possibility according to present circumstances, to stop allowing fear to define identity, to stop surrendering dreams to doubt, to stop waiting for permission, to stop asking whether it is possible, and to begin asking what becomes possible when belief and action unite. Because when a burning desire is supported by faith, strengthened through autosuggestion, guided by specialized knowledge, expanded through imagination, organized through planning, reinforced through decision, sustained through persistence, multiplied through the mastermind, energized through disciplined purpose, impressed upon the subconscious mind, focused through the brain, and elevated through intuition, something extraordinary begins to happen. The person changes, and when the person changes, the future changes. The world begins responding differently because the individual begins acting differently. New opportunities appear. New relationships emerge. New possibilities unfold, not because reality has suddenly become generous, but because a new identity has emerged. The individual has become aligned with a greater vision. And ultimately, that is the deepest lesson hidden beneath every principle, every story, every achievement, and every example. You become what you believe. You become what you repeatedly think. You become what you consistently pursue. You become what you refuse to surrender. You become what you imagine. You become what you decide. You become what you persist through. You become what you train your mind to accept as true. And one day, perhaps sooner than you imagine, you will look back upon your life and realize that the future you once hoped for was not created in a single dramatic moment. It was created thought by thought, decision by decision, action by action, day by day, belief by belief, until the person you imagined became the person you are. And the destiny you once saw only in your mind became the reality standing before your eyes.